I found it by accident. I wasn't snooping, I swear. I was just looking for my phone charger in the common area of our dorm room when I knocked over Reed's backpack. Everything spilled out. Books, pens, his wallet, and this small wooden box I'd never seen before. It fell open on impact, and there it was. A lock of dark brown hair tied with a thin piece of red string. My hair. I knew it was mine because I'd gotten a haircut 3 weeks earlier, and I remembered Reed offering to sweep up afterward. He'd been weirdly insistent about it, said he didn't mind, that I should just relax. I thought he was being nice. I didn't think he was keeping a piece of me. My hands shook as I picked up the box. The wood was smooth, worn, like he'd been holding it a lot. Inside, along with my hair, there was a movie ticket stub from when we'd gone to see that horror film together. He'd grabbed my arm during the jump scares, laughing afterward about how he wasn't usually scared of movies. There was also a receipt from the coffee shop we went to every Thursday morning before our 9 a.m. lectures. He always ordered first. A large black coffee for himself and a caramel latte for me, without asking. He just knew. I heard footsteps in the hallway and panic seized my chest. I shoved everything back into his backpack, my heart hammering so hard I could feel it in my throat. The box went in last, and I was just zipping up the bag when Reed walked in, his arms full of textbooks and a bag of takeout from the Thai place down the street. "Hey," he said, grinning at me with that crooked smile that always made something warm unfold in my chest. "I got us dinner. Hope you like pad Thai because I may have ordered enough to feed a small army." I tried to smile back, but my face felt frozen. "Yeah, that's great. Thanks." He set everything down on his desk and looked at me more carefully. "You okay, Dylan? You look like you've seen a ghost." "I'm fine," I lied. "Just tired. Long day." That was 6 days ago, and I haven't been able to think about anything else since. I keep watching him when he's not looking, trying to figure out what it means. Why would he keep a lock of my hair? Why would he keep that movie ticket, that receipt? And more importantly, why does knowing about it make my stomach flip every time he walks into the room? We've been roommates since the start of sophomore year. Random assignment that turned into the best friendship I've ever had. Reed's the kind of person who makes everything better just by being there. He's funny without trying too hard. Smart in this effortless way that makes professors love him, and he's genuinely kind. Not nice in that surface-level way people are when they want something. Actually kind. He remembers details about people. He asks follow-up questions. When I told him my mom was sick last semester, he checked in with me every single day until she was better. I've always thought he was attractive. You'd have to be blind not to. He's tall, maybe 6'1", with dark blonde hair that's always slightly messy like he just rolled out of bed. He has these green eyes that crinkle at the corners when he smiles, and his hands are elegant, long fingers that drum on his desk when he's thinking. But I never let myself think about him that way. Not really. He's straight, or at least I assumed he was. He dated a girl named Emma for a few months last year, though that ended pretty abruptly and he never really talked about why. The thing is, since I found that box, I've started noticing things I'd somehow trained myself not to see. The way he looks at me sometimes when he thinks I'm focused on my laptop. How he always finds an excuse to touch me. A hand on my shoulder, bumping my knee with his under our desks, ruffling my hair when he walks by. I used to think that was just how he was. Tactile. Friendly. But now every touch feels weighted with meaning I'm afraid to examine too closely. Last night, we stayed up late watching a documentary about deep-sea creatures. Reed loves that stuff, anything weird and scientific and slightly unsettling. We were sitting on his bed because his laptop screen is bigger than mine, and about halfway through he shifted closer. Not in an obvious way, just a gradual migration until his shoulder was pressed against mine, his leg warm along the length of my thigh. I couldn't focus on a single word of the narration. All I could think about was the heat of him next to me and the fact that he had a lock of my hair hidden in a wooden box in his backpack. When the documentary ended, neither of us moved. The laptop had gone dark, and we were just sitting there in the blue glow of his desk lamp, not talking. I could hear him breathing, slow and steady. I wondered if he could hear my heart trying to break out of my chest. I should probably go to bed, I finally said, but I didn't move. Yeah, he said softly. Probably. We sat there for another 10 minutes before I forced myself to stand up and cross the 3 feet to my own bed. I didn't sleep. I just lay there in the dark, listening to him shift around, wondering if he was awake too. This morning, I caught him looking at me while I was getting dressed. I just pulled on a t-shirt, and when I turned around, he was staring with this expression I couldn't quite read. Something intense and vulnerable and almost hungry. Our eyes met, and he looked away fast, his neck flushing red. Sorry, he muttered. Spaced out. It's fine, I said, even though fine was the last thing I felt. We walked to class together like we always do, stopping at the coffee shop like we always do. He ordered for both of us like he always does. But something was different. The air between us felt charged, electric, like right before a thunderstorm when you can feel the pressure building in your bones. At lunch, our friend group was talking about weekend plans. Someone suggested a party at one of the fraternities, and everyone was enthusiastically agreeing except Reed, who was pushing rice around his plate and not saying anything. "You in?" our friend Connor asked him directly. Reed glanced at me before answering, "I don't know. Maybe. Probably not." "Come on, man," Connor pressed. "You never go out anymore. You and Dylan just hide in your room every weekend like a couple of hermits." "We don't hide," Reed said, and there was an edge to his voice I'd never heard before. "We just have better things to do than get drunk and watch people make bad decisions." Connor held up his hands in surrender. All right, didn't mean to touch a nerve. But he had touched a nerve, clearly. Reed was tense for the rest of lunch, his jaw tight, barely participating in the conversation. When we got back to our room, he tossed his backpack on his bed and stood at the window, looking out at the quad with his arms crossed. I sat at my desk, pretending to check my email, but really I was watching his reflection in my laptop screen. He looked troubled, conflicted, like he was wrestling with something big and losing. "Can I ask you something?" he said suddenly, still facing the window. My pulse jumped. Sure. He was quiet for a long moment, and I watched his shoulders rise and fall with a deep breath. Never mind. "It's stupid." "Reed," I said, turning my chair to face him. "What is it?" He finally turned to look at me, and the expression on his face made my chest ache. He looked scared and hopeful and desperate all at once. "Do you ever feel like you're lying to yourself about something important? Like you know the truth, but you're too afraid to admit it?" I swallowed hard. "Yeah, I do." "How do you deal with that?" "I don't know," I admitted. "I guess you just have to decide if living with the lie is worse than facing the truth." He nodded slowly, his eyes never leaving mine. "And what if the truth could ruin everything? What if it could make everything better?" He laughed, but it was a sad sound. "You're an optimist, Dylan. That's one of the things I love about you." The word love hung in the air between us, and I watched him realize what he'd said. His eyes went wide and he looked away quickly, running a hand through his hair. "I should go to the library," he said abruptly. "I have that paper due Monday." He grabbed his laptop and was out the door before I could respond. I sat there in the empty room, my mind racing. "One of the things I love about you." Did he mean it the way it sounded, or was I reading into everything because of what I'd found in that box? I picked up my phone and opened a text to my best friend from high school, Maya. She's the only person who knows I'm gay, the only person I've ever told. I came out to her junior year after months of agonizing about it, and she just hugged me and said she already knew and it didn't change anything between us. I typed out a message. I think my roommate might have feelings for me. then deleted it. Tried again. I found something that makes me think my roommate likes me. Deleted that too. Finally settled on, "Can I call you? It's important." She called me instead, her voice bright and concerned. "What's wrong? Are you okay?" "I'm fine. I just need to talk through something." I told her everything. The box, the hair, the ticket stub, the way Reed had been acting, the things I'd started to notice. Maya listened without interrupting, and when I finished, she was quiet for a moment. "Dylan," she finally said, "do you have feelings for him?" The question hit me like a physical thing. I'd been so focused on trying to figure out what Reed felt that I hadn't let myself examine my own heart. But now, with Maya asking directly, I couldn't avoid it anymore. "Yes," I whispered. "I think I do. I think I have for a while." "Then you need to talk to him. You can't just sit on this." "What if I'm wrong? What if he doesn't feel that way and I make everything weird?" "Dylan, the guy is keeping a lock of your hair in a wooden box. I don't think you're wrong." She had a point. But the thought of actually confronting Reed about it made my stomach twist with anxiety. What would I even say? "Hey, I found your secret box and I know you kept my hair. What's that about?" It sounded insane. We talked for another 20 minutes before Maya had to go. She made me promise I'd say something to Reed soon, that I wouldn't let this just fester. I promised, even though I had no idea how I was going to keep that promise. Reed came back to the room around 8 that evening. I was lying on my bed, supposedly reading a book, but actually just staring at the same page for the last 30 minutes. He looked exhausted, dark circles under his eyes, like he hadn't been sleeping well. "Hey," he said quietly. "Hey." He set his stuff down and sat on the edge of his bed, his hands clasped between his knees. "I'm sorry about earlier. I was being weird. You don't have to apologize." "No, I do." He looked up at me, and there was something raw in his expression. "I've been in my head a lot lately, and I'm taking it out on everyone else." "That's not fair." I sat up, swinging my legs over the side of my bed so we were facing each other with just a few feet of space between us. "What's going on, Reed? And don't say nothing. I know you better than that." He was quiet for a long time, his eyes fixed on the floor. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. "What if I told you something and it changed everything between us? What if you looked at me differently after?" My heart was pounding so hard I felt dizzy. "I wouldn't. You're my best friend. Nothing could change that. You say that now." "Try me." He looked up at me then, and the vulnerability in his eyes made it hard to breathe. "I'm not who you think I am, Dylan. Or maybe I am. But there's this whole part of me I've been hiding because I'm terrified of what it means. And lately I can't hide it anymore. It's eating me alive." I leaned forward, my elbows on my knees. "What part?" He closed his eyes and took a shaky breath. "The part that's in love with you. The part that has been in love with you for months and doesn't know what to do about it because you're straight and my best friend and I'm supposed to be okay with just being your roommate, but I'm not. I'm really not." The world tilted sideways. I heard the words, but they didn't seem real. Reed was in love with me. Reed had just said he was in love with me. "I'm not straight," I said, and my voice sounded strange to my own ears. His eyes snapped open. "What?" "I'm not straight. I'm gay. I've known since I was 15. He stared at me like I'd just spoken in a foreign language. "You never said anything. Neither did you." He laughed, a breathless, disbelieving sound. "Oh my God, this whole time. We looked at each other across the small space of our dorm room, and everything I'd been feeling for the past week suddenly made perfect sense. The box, the hair, the way he looked at me, the way I'd been looking at him. It was all pointing to this moment. "I found your box," I admitted. "Last week, when your backpack fell over. I saw the hair, the ticket stub. I wasn't snooping. It just fell out. His face went pale and then red. Oh, God. Dylan, I can explain. You kept a lock of my hair. I know how that sounds. I know it's weird. After you got that haircut, I was helping clean up and I couldn't stop thinking about how I wanted to keep a piece of that moment. You were sitting in that chair in the bathroom, laughing at something on your phone, and the light was coming through the window and you looked so beautiful. I know that sounds crazy. I know I sound like a stalker. I stood up and crossed the space between us. He looked up at me, eyes wide, and I could see his chest rising and falling with quick, nervous breaths. I knelt down in front of him so we were at eye level. It doesn't sound crazy, I said softly. It sounds like something someone does when they're in love. I am, he whispered. I'm so in love with you it scares me. I reached up and cupped his face with my hand, my thumb brushing his cheekbone. He leaned into the touch, his eyes fluttering closed. I'm in love with you too, I said. I think I have been for a long time. I just didn't let myself see it. When he opened his eyes, they were shining with unshed tears. Really? Really? Can I kiss you? He asked, his voice breaking slightly. I've wanted to kiss you for so long. Instead of answering, I closed the distance between us. His lips were soft and warm, and when they met mine, it felt like coming home, like finding something I didn't know I'd been searching for. He made a small sound in the back of his throat and his hands came up to tangle in my hair, pulling me closer. The kiss deepened, turning desperate and hungry. Months of wanting poured into this single moment. When we finally broke apart, both breathing hard, he rested his forehead against mine. I can't believe this is real, he murmured. It's real. We stayed like that for a while, just breathing each other in, adjusting to this new reality. Eventually, I stood up and pulled him with me. We ended up on his bed, lying face to face, our hands intertwined between us. Tell me when you knew, I said. He smiled, a real smile this time, soft and genuine. Remember that night in October when we got caught in that rainstorm walking back from the library? I remembered. We'd been soaked through, laughing as we ran across campus. When we got back to the room, Reed had tossed me a towel and made hot chocolate in the electric kettle we weren't supposed to have. You were standing by the window, he continued, drying your hair and watching the storm. And you said something about how you loved the rain, how it made everything feel clean and new. The way you looked in that moment, I just knew. I tried to tell myself it was just admiration or friendship, but I knew. I thought about that night, how content I'd felt, how safe. How much of that had been the storm and how much had been Reed. For me, I think it was gradual, I admitted. 1,000 small moments that added up to something I couldn't ignore anymore. But finding that box, knowing you felt something too, that's when I couldn't lie to myself anymore. I'm sorry if keeping that stuff was creepy. It wasn't creepy. It was sweet. It meant something. He squeezed my hand. What happens now? We moved closer at the same time, eliminating the last few inches of space between us. His arm came around my waist, pulling me against him, and I buried my face in his neck, breathing in the familiar scent of his cologne mixed with laundry detergent. Now we stop pretending, I said against his skin. Now we get to be honest. I like the sound of that. We fell asleep like that, wrapped around each other in his narrow dorm bed. When I woke up a few hours later, the room was dark except for the streetlight filtering through the blinds. Reed was still asleep, his face relaxed and peaceful, one hand resting on my hip. I watched him for a while, memorizing the moment. Everything had changed in the space of a few hours, but somehow it also felt like nothing had changed at all. Like this was always where we were headed. The next morning we woke up tangled together, and there was a moment of adjustment, of remembering. Then Reed smiled at me, sleepy and warm, and kissed me gently. Morning, he murmured. Morning. We got ready for the day, moving around each other in our small space, but everything felt different now. Better. When Reed handed me my coffee, his fingers lingered on mine. When I passed him his textbook, he caught my wrist and pulled me in for a quick kiss. At breakfast with our friends, nothing seemed different to them, but everything felt different to us. Our knees touched under the table, our eyes met across conversations. When Connor brought up the party again, Reed just smiled and said maybe we'd stop by, and I knew we wouldn't. We had better things to do. That afternoon, lying in his bed with my head on his chest, Reed asked if I wanted to see what else was in the box. I said yes. He retrieved it from his backpack and opened it carefully, showing me each item and explaining why he'd kept it. A napkin from the first time we'd had lunch together, where I'd drawn a terrible sketch of our economics professor. A guitar pick I'd been looking for months ago that he'd found and pocketed instead of returning. A photo booth strip from the campus festival, both of us making ridiculous faces. "I'm a sentimental idiot," he said, embarrassed. "I think it's perfect," I told him. "I think you're perfect." He kissed me then, long and slow, and I thought about all the time we'd wasted being afraid. But maybe we'd needed that time. Maybe we'd needed to be friends first, to build this foundation of trust and understanding before we could become something more. That night I called Maya to tell her everything. She screamed so loud I had to hold the phone away from my ear. "I told you," she said. "I told you he liked you." You were right. "So when do I get to meet this guy who's been keeping locks of your hair like some kind of romantic Victorian poet?" "Soon," I promised. Soon. After I hung up, Reed asked what Maya had said. I told him about her Victorian poet comment, and he laughed. That full, genuine laugh I loved. "Well," he said, pulling me back down onto the bed with him, "if I'm going to be a Victorian poet, I should probably write you some sonnets." "Please don't. Too late. I'm already composing one in my head. Shall I compare thee to a summer's day? Thou art more lovely and more temperate. That's Shakespeare, you thief." "Fine. I'll write my own. Dylan is cute. Dylan is sweet. Dylan makes my heart skip a beat. How's that?" I groaned and buried my face in his shoulder. "You're terrible. But you love me anyway." "I do," I said, and the truth of it settled warm and certain in my chest. I really do. The weeks that followed were our adjustment period, learning how to be together in this new way while still being the friends we'd always been. We told our close friends, who were universally supportive, even if some of them claimed they'd seen it coming from miles away. We kept it quiet from most people, not because we were hiding, but because what we had felt private and precious, and we wanted to protect it. We learned each other in new ways. I learned that Reed liked to be the little spoon even though he was taller. He learned that I got grumpy if I didn't have coffee within 30 minutes of waking up. We learned how to navigate sharing space as a couple instead of just roommates, how to balance study time and time together, how to have our first argument and work through it. The box stayed on Reed's desk, no longer hidden. Sometimes I'd catch him looking at it with his soft expression, and I'd know he was thinking about those months of secret wanting, of loving me from a distance, and I'd cross the room and kiss him just because I could. One night, about a month after everything changed, we were lying in bed in the dark, that comfortable silence between us that came from knowing someone deeply. Reed's fingers were tracing lazy patterns on my arm. "Thank you," he said quietly. "For what? For finding the box. For not running away. For loving me back." I turned to face him, even though I could barely see him in the darkness. "You don't have to thank me for that. Loving you is the easiest thing I've ever done." He kissed me then, tender and sweet, and I thought about how strange life was. How you could live with someone for months, see them every day, and not realize you were falling in love with them. How a spilled backpack in a wooden box could change everything. How sometimes the person you're looking for is right in front of you, waiting for you to be brave enough to see them. "We're going to be okay," Reed whispered against my lips. "Aren't we?" "We're going to be better than okay," I promised. "We're going to be great." And we were.